Hola, hola, buenas noches. Hey, everybody. Glad to see you here with me on our regularly scheduled Wednesday YouTube Live. I hope y'all are here because I see some folks in the chat, but the little counter number is like, nope, girl, you by yourself. So I don't know what's up with that. Anyway, I'm seeing everybody who's in the chat. Thank y'all for coming back despite my trouble with time zones. As we've established, math is not my strong suit, but time zones are my nemesis. So when I set up this live, I was in a different time zone, and I think I was trying to adjust for what time it was supposed to be when I was back in Mexico, and I got it wrong. And I would not have known if Janella had not messaged me on IG and was like, girl, what time are you going live? And then I came over here and I saw that there were folks waiting. So I apologize for that. And thank y'all for coming back to hang out this evening. Hey, Lee, how are you? Good evening, everybody. All right, so the folks in the Facebook group are here as well. I will say, looking at this where I am in StreamYard, unless if you're watching this on Facebook in my Facebook group, Picky Girls Travel Solo, unless you give StreamYard specific permission, it won't show me your name. So I can't tell who that is. It's not important, but I do like to acknowledge folks by their name. So here we are. What are we talking about tonight? I did not have a nap today. So I can't blame my slow brain on that. Yeah. So my all right, so we'll get started. I said hello. Okay. So the idea behind today's conversation is we hear it all the time that visiting a place and living there are completely different. So just because you can travel to a place doesn't mean you can live there. Um, so if that is indeed true, I really want to explore the question of, well, what does it take to transition from traveler to thriving expat or immigrant? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I would love to hear from those of you who are watching this, those of you in the chat who have made this transition, who are in the process of making this transition. But before we jump into that, I should introduce myself to the new people. And I just lost my window. Okay. So, who am I? The new people are wondering. Well, my name is Adelia Borachade. I am a financial educator who helps mostly Black women develop the financial confidence necessary to live the life of their dreams. I've been getting a lot of questions lately, or maybe some not so nice comments. I I am a Black woman, uh, and that experience, that's the point of view I'm coming from. Those are the people I center. But if you are not a Black woman, but you would like to work with me, you do have that opportunity. You can work with me one on one. So, but yes, my focus is Black women. I am also, as I mentioned, the founder of Picky Girls Travel Solo, a safe space for Black women and femme solo travelers. It is a group on Facebook. Doesn't matter if you are a beginner traveler, a novice, or you are experienced. If you've got questions, you want to share about your trip, you want to ask questions, we do all of that in there. So yeah, that's who I am. Oh, I'm so glad that Halisi from our Black Utopia, who is in Portugal, has just made this transition to being an expat or an immigrant. I'm not sure how you consider yourself. I'm glad you could make it. I know it is super late over there. So glad to see you. Okay. So, um, when I think about like what does it take to be successful and stay abroad, I have been abroad a little bit August, September, October, a little bit over 6 years. Um, and I often do think about like what does it take for people for this to work out for people, for them to have a positive experience or a successful experience. Um, and I think the thing that always pops up is money. Because a lot of people focus on, well, how much is it going to cost me to move abroad? How am I going to afford to live abroad? And, how am I going to be able to afford the lifestyle I want? And yes, those are all concerns. If you watched last week's video, we talked a lot about the most recent Exodus Summit event, which this year's theme was all about move abroad money. Lots of conversations and presentations about different ways to earn money to support that lifestyle. So, yes, there's that piece. And if you had not attended, um, Exodus Summit and you're like, hold on, they had a whole summit about making move abroad money. Are there replays? Yes, there are. And so if you are interested in that, go to exodussummit.com and you can buy access to those replays. So, yes, there is the part of the conversation that talks about like how can you afford uh, to move abroad. I actually did a whole video on it called Creating a Financial Plan to Move Abroad, which I was thinking ahead. I actually did link in the description of this video. If you want to like walk through what are the things that I need to be planning for before I move, during the move, after the move, so that you can like come up with a number of this is how much money I think I need to have to make that move possible. Um, so there is that piece of it. Um, but I don't think that's the only one. I think there's also another element to the financial piece of like when you are in this new country, kind of, I guess I want to frame it as your financial outlook, your financial perspective. One of my pet peeves, one of my beefs, or one of the things that I notice a lot that just don't sit right with me is folks move to another country and the way they move in the economy, it's kind of like they're carrying with them this notion that, like, oh, it's so cheap here, like it doesn't matter. This is so, so cheap, and not thinking about things in terms of the local economy. I talk about a lot the fact that um, the minimum wage here in Mexico is about $8 a day. So where if you're freshly coming from a more expensive place like the United States and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this meal was a bargain. It was just $10." But not thinking about it in terms of the local economy and that meal is actually more than what somebody would earn in a day, like a 12-hour, 14-hour day of with earning minimum wage. I think that can be a problem. I think that can make your transition difficult. Um, a lot of people who move abroad, one of their I don't know if I want to use the word complaints, is that, the locals look at them like, oh, you're rich, you have all this money. Well, think about it. If you've been moving like, oh, these are bargain basement prices, of course, people are going to have that kind of attitude about you and your money. So, so yeah, that's one of the things that I think, you know, goes a long way in like, are you ready to move abroad? Are you ready to like leave the economics of the place you're coming from behind and really uh, submerge yourself in the economics of the new country? And please do not take this to mean that I'm saying you need to like haggle and try and like talk people down off their prices. I'm just saying move with some intention and some what's the word? Some kind of cognizance of where you are, you know, that sort of thing. Um oops. Go back to my list here. Then, of course, there's like the logistics piece of moving abroad. Are you ready? Have you done all of the logistics? Oh, that's it right there. Read the room. Read the room. That's good. Um, have you done the logistics? And in case y'all didn't know, I have a move abroad checklist that I think could be really helpful with the logistics because if this is something that you've never done before, it might be hard to know. Well, what are all of the things that I need to take in consideration from a logistical standpoint? Like, you know, am I going to ship all of the things in my house? Does that make sense for where I'm going, the kind of life I'm trying to live, all of that sort of thing? What are some of the logistical concerns that you should be aware of before you make the move? Like, for example, some people are like, I'm out of the US. I'm done here. I'm never going to be here anymore. And like they get rid of their US mailing address. Um, that's not a great idea, really, from a logistical standpoint, because as long as you are a US citizen, you hold a US passport, you having a physical address in somewhere in the country is going to be of a benefit to you. So, if you didn't know, you can grab the checklist to which there is a link in the description below. Oops, I pressed the wrong thing. Okay. Um, and I think part of that logistical thing is like the physical piece of it. Depending on where you are going to move, like, is the climate different? Are you going to have to walk more? Are you going to walk less? Like that plays into it. Um, if if you have a particular health condition where extreme temperatures are not really your friend, but you have your heart set on moving to Abu Dhabi, I don't know that that's going to work well for you. And so being there could be proved to be very difficult on you and then might lead to you needing to leave. Okay. This is an interesting comment. Understanding the rental market. What is the responsibility of a tenant versus a landlord? What comes with the apartment, the house? How long is the agreement? That is really, really good. I am navigating a little of this right now. I have a leaky shower head, and I'm not sure if that's my responsibility. I think it probably is, but my landlord tends to be a little uh, more accommodating about those things than most of the Mexican landlords I hear about. So the plumber's coming tomorrow. I'm prepared to pay for the plumber, but I'm also hoping the plumber will be like, no, that's okay. I will get the money from your landlord. I don't know how it's going to go. So, yeah, that is a good point. That is a good point. Here in Mexico, uh, landlords don't feel, or at least here in Mexico City, it may be different in other parts of the country, but here, landlords don't seem to feel like they have much of an obligation. I found that that was a, I don't want to say a culture shock, but that was something I was unprepared for, because when I was looking for apartments this last time when I moved back here from China, I was being shown apartments that were not in move-in condition. They had not been cleaned, they had not been painted, and there was no indication at all that the landlord had any intention on doing any of those things. And so, like that, I had to change how I was approaching the apartment search after I discovered that, because yeah, I was not finna do all that. Um, One of the things, when I think about what makes somebody successful in adapting to the new place, one thing that always comes back to me are expectations. When I see the stories of people who, they for whatever reason end up calling it quits, they decide to leave. A lot of times it seems like their expectations are not in line with what life is like in that particular country. Um, and that's a hard thing to get right. It's really, unless you are taking a what do you call the trip where you go to check a place out? A scouting trip. Unless you're taking a scouting trip, sometimes that's hard to get right, because all you can do is research. You read what it says on the internet. You go into these different Facebook groups or something like the Expat app, and you ask questions, and you come to your best conclusion. But uh, sometimes you can't know everything, and so expectations. My suggestion, if you want to move abroad, is to have no expectations when moving to your new country. um, Prime example, the first country I moved to when I left the US was Honduras. And it never occurred to me in all the research I did, and doing research was really difficult because I had chosen a country where so few people like myself or people from the US moved there. So there wasn't a lot of like, oh, if you're immigrating to Honduras, this is what you need to do. Or if you're becoming an expat in Honduras, this is what you need to do. There just wasn't that. So, I'm trying to piece together different bits of information here and there. And I had no clue that there was no mail service. I didn't even know there were countries in the world where I didn't know that was an option. This is the 21st century. I didn't know that was an option. And so, like, in my notes for this live, I have like, um how how important to you is a dependable mail service? Like, what is your expectation there? If you're going into a country and you have an expectation that things are going to run like the US Postal Service, you may be in for a big disappointment. And that's just one example. But because when I got to Honduras, there was nothing. Like, some of y'all have heard me say this before, but like, street, first of all, nobody really used the names of the streets. Uh, Addresses were made up. There was no rhyme or reason to them. Like, you built a house, you got to pick a number at random what you wanted the street address to be, because nobody used them. Um, if I was getting something, let's say, delivered by FedEx or DHL or something, my address was next to the school, Brown Gate. They knew the city, they knew what my neighborhood was called, but how they were supposed to find the particular place I live, the same thing, like when I would order pizza from Pizza Hut, that was the address that I put into the online form. And so if I had been somebody who, let's say, was like really counting on the ability to receive and send mail, if that had been my expectation, that would have been a really bad expectation to have moving to that particular country. So I'm of the mind to not have any expectations. That way, if things don't go, if they don't meet an expectation, it's like not that big of a deal. Charisma says, I realized very early in my journey that my expectations were too high. Now I try to go with very little. I know, and it may sound kind of like a crazy thing for me to say that, like don't have expectations, but really and truly, like if you can completely remove expectations, that's going to make the experience that much smoother because um you get your feel I think Charisma would agree with this. You get your feelings hurt if you've got all these expectations and this new country is like, girl, we don't do that. We're not about all of that. Hey, Jackie, glad you made the live. Um, let's see. Okay, this is an interesting question. When it comes to apartment hunting and is the issue that we're bringing US expectations or people playing us because we are from the US? That is a good question. Um I don't know. When I looked for an apartment here, I tried my best not to communicate with anyone in English because most of it was done text over WhatsApp or email. I figured I would deal with having to actually speak Spanish once I got there, but I tried to keep, I tried not to speak English throughout the process to kind of eliminate some of the, oh, she's a foreigner, what have you. In talking to a friend of mine who was living a very different kind of lifestyle, because we've talked about, and those of you who attended Exodus Summit last week, when a company moves you abroad, like that's a very different kind of move than when you move yourself abroad. And this was a DIY move. I moved myself here. That meant I was the one finding apartments. I was the one scheduling showings, all of that. Nobody was helping me with any of that. But when I talked to a friend who was a corporate expat, their experience was very different. But I chalked that up to the price point being different. Like when they knew they were getting corporate money, there was much more of an incentive to have an experience similar to what people would have coming from the US or whatever country they were coming from. But I guess I can't technically know, but I will say to kind of alleviate some of that, I try not to communicate in English if I can help it. Uh, so yeah. Okay. Going back to my mail comment now, our Black Utopia, Halisi and Rick, they are in Portugal. And so one would think this is a European country. Mail should be, no, y'all. That's, I know we have our issues with the US Postal Service, but when you compare them to the mail situation internationally, very few countries do it as well as they do. So, if is something like that going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? Is that going to be the thing that does you in? And a lot of the things I think that do sometimes ultimately kind of do people in, it's small things like that. Roxanne says in Panama. Yeah. So I say minimal expectations is the best way to stave that off. Uh, Amazon isn't everywhere. It takes a week or so through the carrier if somebody has figured out a workaround to get Amazon. Anita says the good news is no junk mail. That is true. Like the only mail I get sometimes are my bills. Sometimes the bills show up when they're supposed to, sometimes they don't. And that things like that, trying to pay your utilities and uh, knowing that, like the gas company, gas here is not subsidized. So that means if you're late, they will cut you off. Uh, my gas bill does not always show up. It doesn't always show up before it is due. So, and utility bills are every 2 months. So one would think if I was on top of stuff, I would like mark on the calendar and set a reminder. Hey, it's been 2 months since you paid the gas bill. Go ahead and pay it. But I haven't done that. I haven't done that because really my concern is let me just pay them before it gets cut off. And so playing that game of is the bill going to come in time? Can I figure out how to pay the bill without the paper bill? Will they accept my form of payment this month? 2 months ago, they wouldn't, but the 2 months before that, they did. How things change like that. So, like our expectation coming from a country like the US, it's like, what's wrong with them? Why can't they get their act together? Why can't they accept XYZ form of payment, blah, blah, blah. And it just doesn't work like that here. And if something like that is going to be a problem, you really do have to ask your question, are you built for this life? Because it in the grand scheme of things, it's a small thing. But you get enough small things that add up, and that could be a problem. Is it possible to negotiate adding utilities to the rental price if you just go on a tourist visa, or should you just look for an apartment where everything is included? Okay, this is another expectation thing coming from the US. If somebody quotes you an apartment rent and they say everything is included, you feel like, oh, that's a great deal. Um, that I'm very unimpressed when I see that here because like my what is this? This is my electricity bill for 2 months. It is $6. So wh- you include my $6 utility bill. The thing is, here the utilities aren't in our names anyway. So it doesn't matter if you're on a tourist visa, a residency visa, you pay the bill because you have the bill in your hand, not because it is in your name. And so the expectation of, oh, it's all bills paid, they include everything. To me, that expectation of what we would have in the US, like that is a good deal, that they're doing me a favor. No, I don't think so. I think here they're actually probably screwing you over if they do something like that. Okay. So I'm scrolling through the chat to see if I picked up if I missed anything. No junk mail. Yeah, like I haven't gotten mail mail in years. In years. Uh, um, Lee wants to know my bills are automatically taken out of my checking account. How does that work in Mexico City? Paying utility bills. Okay, this is another question to ask yourself. Like, would this annoy you? Um, in the US, I I can't remember the last time I wrote a check for a bill because, pretty much everything was paid online or what have you. But here, you have the separate bills. A lot of people here do not have bank accounts. So the greater system is designed for you to go pay your bill in person, whether that is at a kiosk or you're going to the convenience store like the OXXO or the 7-Eleven, and you can pay your bill there. There are some bills that I can pay directly through my bank account. My gas bill is not one of them, which is a real pain in the butt. But like I can recharge my cell phone, I can pay my electricity bill, my water bill, which is overdue, all to all, how much is it? It's like 56 pesos. So what's that, about $2.50? I can't pay it. I can't figure out. I've been here 2 years, y'all. Really more than 2 years. I've been here 2 years and I cannot figure out how to make a payment online through the water company's website. I can't pay it through my bank account. My bill, my most recent bill, showed up after the due date. So that means I cannot take it to the convenience store to pay it. The only way to pay it at this point is for me to physically go to the water company. Luckily, water is subsidized, so they're not going to cut me off. So I got a little while before I can do that. But that's the kind of thing when you're used to certain systems being in place and things happening very quickly, it can be annoying to have to revert to doing things this way. Raquel, I think you hit the nose on the head. Sounds like when you move abroad, it's important to remember the 80-20 rule rather than seeking perfection. Absolutely. Because if you are looking for things, and I don't care what country you move to, if we want to use the outdated terminology of like developed, developing country, first world country, third world country, it doesn't matter. You can move to a so-called developed country, a so-called first world country, and I guarantee you there's going to be something that you're like, this is stupid. Why does this work this way? Why doesn't it work this other way? So yes, if you are looking for perfection, you are setting yourself up to be unhappy. Charisma makes another good point. And honestly, we question people when they come to the US and want to change things. It's really about putting ourselves in their shoes. Absolutely. As I was planning like what I wanted to talk about, I was trying to think like, what are the characteristics of people who do this successfully, who immigrate to another country or who become an expat in another country and they can stay abroad? Like, what are the characteristics? Keeping the expectations to a minimum. I have humility, remembering that you are a guest in this country. I mean, I have residency here. I consider this to be home, but this is not the place I was born. And I stay cognizant of that and make sure that I'm not always bringing that, well, this is how we did it in the US, or this is how things, I am not in the United States anymore. Things do not work the same way. So I have to adjust. I have to be flexible. When you find out that you don't have a street address, or like when I lived in Honduras, so y'all can imagine there was no Uber or anything like that. If you're trying to go, like I was trying to go to the dentist office and I'm trying to explain to the taxi driver where I need to go so we can negotiate a price, but I can't give him the name of the street or the address because that means nothing to him. So I'm trying to describe the building I need him to take me to that I've never been to before. So, like, being flexible, being adaptable, and having to figure out how to work in a system like that, that is absolutely a skill you need to have. Flexibility. I talk about you got to keep your knees bent. Like, just be ready for the unexpected. Be ready just for literally for anything. There are times when, like, okay, uh gosh, I forgot. Was this a month ago when we went to get our driver's license? And I had read through all the stuff online. I'd read people's comments, and I'm trying to piece together what most likely we can expect when we go. But because this is living abroad, I also was trying to anticipate, okay, well, what happens if they say this is different, or this, they don't take this, or this happens, this sort of thing. Being flexible, being able to adapt when things don't go as planned. That, along with having minimal expectations, I think, like, that's the key. That's the secret sauce. You know, there are certain expectations we have in the US about what a government agency or government office is supposed to do. Um, and that kind of flies out the window when you don't live in the US. It doesn't matter what kind of country it is, but this idea, I'm scrolling through the chat, and I'm seeing y'all tripping about my $6 light bill. That's for 2 months, by the way. That's for 2 months. Um, you know, expecting, like, immigration. I just had somebody ask in the local Facebook group about, like, well, what paperwork do I need if I'm going to finish processing my visa? And I know people get tired of us saying this. It depends. It can change every day. It could change every week. And you would think a government agency, they should have a policy, and that should be the policy. That might be the policy, but all the workers in that office may not even know what that policy is. And so, letting go of that. Um, um Y'all really tripping about that electricity bill. But remember, y'all, I don't have AC. I do not have heat, which is why I am in this sweater, because it's kind of cool here today. It's kind of cool here today. So flexibility, so, like, the government doesn't respond in the way that you're used to in your home country. How flexible are you to deal with the whole rigmarole and what do you call it, bureaucracy? Like, when I lost my green card and I had to jump through all those stupid hoops to get a new one, I would not wish that on anybody. Trying to figure out, one, what the process was, because that wasn't even published anywhere on any government website. Uh, you know, just having to be like, okay, well, these people told me one thing, these people told me something else. I'm just going to go up there with as many different pieces of paper as I can think of, and we'll see which ones they want to take. I also think being adaptable is a really good characteristic uh, that you should have if you are going to move abroad. If you don't handle change well, I think you really have to ask yourself some questions. Because, yes, I know change is hard, but being able to adapt to your new environment, um, especially if it's a country where it's not the same language of the country you were born in. Um, okay, here's an example. And I'm not sure why this kind of irritates me, because I see it a lot, and I'm not sure why it irritates me, because I should not be this invested in how other folks are moving through this country. But people will be new to town and they will post like, hey, does anybody know where I can take a yoga class, a this class, a that class in English? And that just gets under my skin, because I'm thinking, like, you've chosen to move to this new place. Yes, I understand. You are going to take Spanish classes, you're going to take language classes, you're going to learn. But maybe you just find a place that teaches the class you want. Like, why does it have to be in English? I feel like there should be some adapting there. I don't know. Am I being unreasonable? I don't know why that one thing gets to me, but it does. It does. It does. I'm a, okay. Y'all are I I'm laughing at the reactions because there's a whole slew of reactions. I know I'm probably way behind in the chat uh about this, but again, okay, this is what we're talking about. Don't look at that from the perspective of US prices. Remember, I told you that here the daily minimum wage is about $8. So if you think about it in those terms, the what a bargain the utilities are is not quite the same. Keep in mind that electricity and water are both subsidized. Let me see if I can tell y'all how much my bill should have been. Okay, before the basically my bill was twice as much before the subsidy. Because it was 256 pesos before, and now it's 122 pesos. So I guess I'm not sure what the story is about why those utilities are subsidized. I'm going to guess it's because like people need electricity, people need access to water, and maybe gas. The government's like, you on your own. We subsidize in the electricity. If you want gas, that's a luxury. We don't subsidize that. Uh, let's see. So yeah, that's what I mean about like looking at it in terms of what it costs, what things are in the local economy. Um, and no, you cannot pay ahead on your account. That Rashida has tried that a couple of times. That money just disappears. Because again, in the US, you would be able to do that. You would get a credit. That's not how things work here. So it just doesn't. Okay. Yes. Patience. Patience is crucial to living abroad. Uh, I can't speak for other countries, but I know in the US our culture is everything needs to happen really really fast. It needs to happen right now. If not, it needed to happen yesterday. And I think if that syncs well with you, you may struggle because outside the US, time does not, people don't, time is not a construct to be viewed that way. Time, you will hear me say it about living here all the time. Time does not exist. It doesn't. It takes you some time to get some places. Things are much slower. And so if, because see, a lot of us we want to leave the US because we're like, oh, I want a slower pace of life. But we don't always think about what does that really mean. It's not just you and your personal life will be slower, like, oh, I can take my time getting up in the morning and I can have a leisurely breakfast. It means everything is slower and more leisurely. That means, as somebody like me who wakes up at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., and I would like to eat and I would like to not cook it myself, I am basically out of luck unless I want to buy sandwiches and tamales on the street, which I don't because they're already pre-made with stuff on them that I don't eat. So because things are laid back and they open later. When I was in Sweden and in Denmark, places did not open until like 10 and they closed at 6. So that's very different than what I was used to in the US. So think about how that then impacts how you live your life in one of those countries. Okay. Boom. Going through here. Another characteristic I think is important if you are planning to move abroad is, are you being like solution oriented, being a problem solver? Because we've already talked about how things are probably not going to go the way you expect. They're going to take longer than you expect. They're not going to work the way that you expect. Are you somebody who can roll with that and adjust and come up with a solution to get done what you need to get done? If that's not a strong suit of yours, is there a way that you can kind of prepare for that before you make that move abroad? Or are you somebody that when things don't go the way you want, you just dissolve into a puddle? Because if that's the case, moving abroad may not be for you, because more often than not, things are not going to go to plan. More likely than not, they are not. Okay. Kelly says, forgive me for asking, but why have a bunch of differing info on government websites versus in person versus the facility? Wouldn't that deter people from moving there? Okay, so one, are they trying to encourage people to move here or move other places? I don't know. I don't know. Things change. That's what I have learned. Things and policies change. And I guess the way we use the internet and websites in the US, we would expect, oh, you've got a policy change. You're going to update that on your website. That does not always happen here. Now, why? I don't know. Is it because it's not anybody's job to make that change? I don't know. Is it because it's like, well, we changing it this week. We see how we like it. Maybe we change it to something different next week. Who knows? For example, when you come to process the second part of your residency visa, pre-pandemic, you used to need to provide your own photos. There was no capability at the immigration office for taking your photographs. Well, I don't know if it still says it now, but I know at least a year into the pandemic, the website still said you needed to provide 2 of these photos in this certain size. And people were getting them, and then they show up at I&M and they're like, oh no, we don't need that anymore. So I don't understand why things work the way they do. And that's another thing. I used to say, you can't make sense out of crazy, or like, don't try to make sense out of crazy. I could keep myself all night trying to make sense of some of the things that the Mexican government does. I just say, they changed it again. And I keep it moving. I don't know why they are this way, but they are. Very much so. Very much so. So, but didn't someone say laws or suggestions? I think I said that. I think I said that because that's very much what it feels like. Like, yes, technically that is what the law says, but that's more like a guideline. In real life, it's more like a guideline. And the thing that I notice, and I noticed this in like some of the larger expat groups that are mixed, some people get really bent out of shape about things like, oh, I went to immigration and what they told me last week isn't true anymore. This new thing happened. And instead of just being like, okay, how can I, is there a way that I can keep more up to date about these changes? Like who's in the loop? It's more of they get upset and they're wanting to complain. And I don't know that that's the greatest use of anybody's energy. I don't think so. Oh, y'all love my $6 electricity bill till you found out I don't have any heat or AC. It's usually it's usually not that big of a deal in this apartment. I'm very, very fortunate. My apartment is fairly warm. Um, but where I used to live was not. It was like an ice box. It was an ice box. Okay. Uh, Yeah, and y'all, I will admit that this might be my little like I need to get over myself with this because I can understand why somebody might be like, I'd really like to find a doctor who speaks English because I have tried to go to the dentist when I lived in Honduras and they did not speak English. That was an interesting experience. And then when Mia got really, really sick 2 years ago, I went to the vet and that's when I discovered that I don't have medical Spanish. Like I can do regular everyday stuff, but I could not communicate sufficiently. So I get that. But, for things that are not like life and death, I think maybe we could try and adapt a little bit. Um, and I will also say, like, I took a month of salsa classes in at a local school. So I think I was the only foreigner. The class was completely in Spanish. Um, I learned a few new words. Like there were things I picked up, like he keeps saying this. Like I had never heard this word before, but the way the teacher kept using it, I kind of inferred what the meaning was. Now there were times I had no clue what was going on, and I just tried to look like, but I was able to, one, my listening comprehension improved, and two, I was able to pick up new vocabulary. So that's why I feel like it's still worth it. Okay. um Best advice for the rookies: get rid of your expectations. I think that's the biggest thing that hamstrings folks, is they have these expectations about how life is supposed to work. And you are in a whole nother country with a whole different history, a whole different, like development. Let go of that. To me, that's the biggest one. And then be flexible, be adaptable. I think that's, to me, that's the biggest one. Uh, Say if you expect people to adapt in the US, adapt when you go abroad. And it's funny because some of these people who I mentioned who just get bent out of shape have, it's like you want a system to give you grace, but in the place where you come from, you're not willing to extend that to other people. So it's kind of hilarious to see them like melt down here, because it's like, yeah, you're getting a little taste of what you dished out to other folks. I will say, yeah, as a Caribbean American, I've learned that time is a suggestion. My relationship to time has really, it changed when I left the US, because people can say this is what time the meeting starts, this is what time the store opens, this is what time you should be there, and that really does not have the same meaning at all, at all. Would you recommend a scouting trip to the country, moving, or selecting a country? Um, I'm team scouting trips are not necessary. I have never scouted a country that I have lived in, although technically my time in Scandinavia was low key a scouting trip. So if by chance I ever end up living in Sweden or Denmark, I'll have to amend that. I interviewed Robin, and there is a link in the description of this video where we talk about why she chose to do a scouting trip and how she prepared for it and the kind of things she did. I think it is completely possible to choose a country and have a successful move without a scouting trip. But if, as I have been describing these characteristics that I think people who move or immigrate need to have, if, as I've been going through those characteristics, you've been like, that's no, I need to have it like then maybe you're the kind of person that definitely needs to have a scouting trip. Um, and my one caveat to that would be that if you're going to do a scouting trip, you have to make a conscious effort to live like you would live when you were there and not l- behave like you would on a vacation. That means trying to do the things you would do in your regular everyday life, like um, going and figuring out how do I add more time to my SIM card. Um, I'm trying to think what else. Like going, figuring out where is the grocery store, going to the grocery store, figuring out like how do I or to the market, how do I request like I want a pound of this or a kilo of that, that kind of thing. That if you're going to do it, make sure that you're doing like living activities while you're there, not just fun touristy things. Um, let's see. Somebody, I remember going to Europe for the first time and finding out restaurants don't open until 5 p.m. for dinner. I was shook. Yeah. And even if you show up at 5 p.m., they're looking at you like, why are you in here? Dinner's not till 8 or 9. Uh, let's see. Um, Yvette said, is that a sweater? I just left Merida. Yeah, it's a sweater. I mean, it's October, so this is about the time of year that it starts to cool down here. But I think because it's been kind of overcast all day, which is unusual. So I'm wondering if there's a hurricane on one of the coasts, because sometimes because we're in the middle of the country, we will get rainfall from either one of those. Mm. I'd love to serve with a US based company or an NGO to take care of the logistics because man, oh man, this moving abroad thing is work. It can be. It definitely can be. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. Okay. Okay, I see some of y'all's questions specifically about my situation. I'm a mark those and we'll come back to them. And people who get uptight at the little things are the ones that are too wrapped tightly in the American flag. That is a very interesting way to put that. I'm not saying I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from there. Okay. Um, yeah. Maybe moving abroad, short-term pain, long-term gain versus staying in the US, long-term pain, no gain. Um, Definitely, I'm not we're not having this conversation to discourage anyone, but I want people who are embarking on this journey to do it with their eyes open. Because the more you can anticipate, or the more you know about, like, oh yeah, Adelia said they might change the policy again this week. Like, the last few weeks, I've been traveling internationally quite a bit. And the process for somebody with residency to leave Mexico and re enter Mexico literally changed over the weekend. What they were doing when I left Friday and what they were doing when I came back Saturday was different. And so, if I was somebody who was not flexible and adaptable and kept my expectations to a minimum, that could have really stressed me out. But I was just like, okay, this is what we're doing today. Maybe this is what we'll be doing next week when I catch my next flight. Maybe not. We shall see. We shall see. Carissa says, I had my son go to a physical therapist that only spoke Spanish. That was fun. I know a little, but you pick up quickly with the repetition. The repetition, that's what's key. Because that's what I learned in the dance class. Like, he would keep repeating this word over and over. And I was like, okay, I got to figure out what this is. Roxanne says, 11 years in all my docs speak fluent English. That's the one thing I'm not winging. I can understand that. And as I get ready to be like a for real grown up and like go to the doctor and stuff, I'm probably going to aim for somebody who at least speaks some English. Because I know my Spanish, I don't have medical Spanish. I know I don't. Uh, okay. I'm laughing at some of y'all's comments. We're gonna come back and talk to them. Let me get down to the bottom uh of this. What is your experience with con artists, if any? I think that when people, the whole process of relocating to another country is rife with opportunities for people to take advantage of you and scam you. Um, I was gonna say unfortunately, but I don't know if this is unfortunately. I don't trust folks in the US. So that distrust, I take that with me. So I'm always suspicious of things that don't seem right, that sound too good to be true. I have not personally had any experience with any scammers. Oh, well, when I was apartment hunting, there were several ads I came across where it became very apparent to me very quickly that it was a scam. But, like, the same as I would anywhere, I'm not going to pay somebody for a place before I have seen it, before I've seen things that make me reasonably certain that they have the right to rent it out, stuff like that. So, no, I have not had uh, that unfortunate experience. Okay. Okay. Heading to Mexico City tomorrow. I'm definitely not prepared for sweater weather. It may be warmer tomorrow. And see, that's the weather here as well. Some days, well, any day here, you should be ready with layers because it may start cool. Once the sun comes out, it's warm, and then it's like, oh, okay, it's gonna be cold again. So I think, I don't know, maybe living here has kind of made me better at the ability to just roll with things, because the only thing, what is it I always say that I can't remember now? The only thing for certain is uncertainty. Like, once you come to terms with that, it's like, oh, okay, today I need a coat. Tomorrow I can wear shorts. You know, whatever the deal is, it's not, it's not, it's not that big. It doesn't bother me so much anymore. I just roll with it. I just roll with it. Okay. Was there anything else on my list? We talked about being a problem solver, like making sure that you're focused on a solution. Yes, this may suck that this thing did not happen the way it was supposed to. You were told this, you showed up with this, all of this paperwork. You get there and they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, no, we're not doing that. Do you dissolve into a puddle, or do you start working on your next plan? Case in point, when I lived in Honduras, there was a snafu that one of my daughter's teachers made that impacted her immigration status. Honduras has very strict laws when it comes to children entering and exiting the country because of child trafficking. As a foreigner, my daughter would not have been subject to some of the restrictions, but her teacher checked that she was a resident. All of a sudden, the authorities at immigration were like, oh, okay, so then we need this documentation from her dad that says she can leave the country. And I was like, well, her dad is in Texas. Um, and this all happened while we were at the airport where they were getting ready to fly to Costa Rica for a field trip. And she was the only kid this happened to, and she could not get on the plane with the rest of them. So, had I been somebody who was like, this is ludicrous, this is bullshit, like, and just been like, threw my hands up in the air, my kid wouldn't have gotten to go to Costa Rica. But instead, I was like, okay, so tell me what it is that will suffice to you. Got to talking to some of the parents. One of the parents knew somebody who could sign off some things and figured out, okay, we need to go to the embassy to get this authenticated, go over here, there. She was able to eventually join the school trip a day or two later. But in the instant that it became clear to me she wouldn't be allowed to get on the plane, I started to figure out, okay, so how can I make this happen for my kid? So, figuring out, being focused on the solution and not so much the problem. I talked about having some humility. We talked about, remembering that this is not your country. Just because they do it different than the way you did it back home is not a negative. And being culturally sensitive. All of those are good characteristics that are going to help you with that move abroad. I would also say, um, to think about, when you're thinking about, am I ready to move abroad? Think about where you are emotionally. Because again, like, I've got the checklist to help you with the financial piece, with the logistical piece, but where are you at emotionally? Are you in a place in your life where you can handle change? Because change is hard. Um, what about the work that is going to be necessary to maintain relationships now that you are moving to this other place? Um, what kind of shape are you in mentally? Will you be able, living in a strange place where the dominant language is not one of yours, being alone, like, are you going to be able to handle that? Or are there some things that you can start doing and putting into place to help make that adjustment easier for you? Yes, be culturally aware and respectful. You have to respect the culture and the laws of your newfound home, even if you do not agree with them. And that was one of my struggles when I lived in Kuwait. Um, because there was the whole like, oh, The men go through this elevator, the women go through this elevator. You can sit in this side of the waiting room if you're a woman, but you know, like I did not care for that. But I had to have some act right because I was a guest in their country. But yeah, the mental piece, because I think that may be kind of the one that we underestimate. Because again, not only just your mental situation, but if you're living in a place where all these other things are not going the way you want, not meeting your expectations, all of that, that can then also chip away at your mental situation. Um, and make it that much harder for you to be successful there. Okay. Nita says, these are very good questions that I likely may not know until I get there. Yeah, makes me think and take pause. I think if we ask ourselves these questions before we make the move, you can start to prepare yourself to kind of anticipate, okay, this might be a trigger for me. Are there ways that I can mitigate that so that that's less of an issue when I get there? Um, if you're feeling isolated, can you tap into community? Um, and I would say, as somebody who, I'm in the Facebook groups or whatever, it's sad, but it also irks me when folks, they don't try and tap into the community until they have reached their breaking point. It's like, I hate it here or I gotta go. And it's like, girl, but you've been here 6 months and you didn't reach out to any of us before now, so and that's the thing. Like maybe you're somebody who that wouldn't normally be your move. But if you take some time to consider that before, and you set like you make a promise to yourself, okay, if I'm there for 1 month and I start to feel this way, this is the plan of action I have, this is what I am going to do. I think having a plan can be very, very helpful. Okay, thank you, F Doctor, for giving us a little summary here. Appreciate that. Okay. Say researching the places you want to live will reduce some anxiety and stress. Research all the questions you have. Yeah. And it's it's also good to maybe put out there like what is, because you don't know what you don't know. Like I didn't know about the whole address thing. I was blown away by that uh, until I got there. When I was in China, I didn't know that they don't really do holidays. That anytime you have a day off from work for a holiday, you're expected to make up that time. I didn't know that because I didn't ask about it because I didn't know I needed to know. So it may also behoove you to be like, what was the thing that surprised you? What was something you never thought to ask about and you did? What's the craziest thing you experienced since moving there? You may get a response that you hadn't even considered. Okay. All right. So the questions, some of the questions that y'all had. Okay, hold on. The community, how do I tap into the community? Is it Facebook? Is it Insta, social media channels? Can I plug in socialize? That's one of those things that should be part of your research. I would hope that you're not trying to do this on the fly and figure this out when you land. One of the things that we talk about all the time is Start building community before you even get there, whether that is a Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, connecting with people on YouTube or what have you. The Expat app uh, is a great place to do that if you are looking to connect with Black folks who are living this life all over the world. But it's definitely something that you want to start doing before, because that way, when you are in need, you're not also struggling to figure out, okay, well, where is the community? Who is the community? Okay. Uh, Let me tell y'all, I try not to get bent out of shape about things. But this was so irritating to me because I kept saying, not that anybody cared what I thought, but I kept saying, y'all are just rearranging the calendar. This is not a holiday. Irritated me to no end. And it was no fun having to work 6 and 7 day weeks just so I could get a 3 day or a 4 day weekend. I did not like that at all. Okay. Okay. So, some of the questions I saw that y'all had earlier, these are just random, which is fine. Uh, okay. I think I got to put on my geography teacher hat for this. Crazy question. Since Mexico is part of North America, why aren't the people considered Americans same for Canada? Technically, they are. And I tell you, the people who get real bent out of shape about this are people from South American countries. Some of them get irritated when folks from the US refer to themselves as Americans and refer to the United States as America, because they're like, well, these are the Americas. There's North America, there's South America. That is true. Is it possible for two things to be true at the same time? Yes. I would also throw into that that it is correct to refer to the United States as America. That is the short form of its name. It's the long form is United States of America. The short form is America. Just like we call this country Mexico. That is the short form of its name. Its long form is the United States of Mexico. So yes, they are American. They are Americans, so are Canadians, so are Brazilians. But two things can be true at the same time. I think I probably got a little too passionate about that because that's the geography nerd in me. Um, so yeah. Okay. Do you think going through a reputable realtor in a particular country is a good idea? Sure. But what is a reputable realtor? What does that look like? That should be part of your research, because uh realtors here in Mexico don't work the way they do in the United States. Where else? In China, there were agents, but I'm not sure how that worked either. Because this is the only country I've lived in where I've had to find my own apartment. But in your research, one of the things you do want to ask is like, how does that work? Do realtors show other properties other than things that are personally listed with them? Is there some kind of like MLS system or similar? We don't have that here. So that's part of what makes finding an apartment in this city such an adventure. Um, Excuse me. How do you get important mail once you've moved abroad? I guess making it paperless as much as you can. That's exactly what you do. This is why my one of my big pieces of advice to you is to always keep a US address, because there are going to be some documents that, depending where you live, it's something you don't want to get lost in the mail. Like, for example, I was approached by a fabric store in the UK to be like I shudder to say influence, where basically they were like, look, we will send you some fabric, whatever you make out of it, just post it online, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, sure. Um, that was 3 months ago. That fabric has not showed up. Now they mailed me fabric when I lived in China and it showed up, uh, even with the pandemic, but it's never come here. So the idea that you would change your address to your foreign address and expect your important documents to make it there, that is a gamble. This is why you would either, I would think, of course, you're going to make it as paperless as possible. And either you're going to maintain an address through like one of the like global mailbox kind of people, or you use a relative's address. Like I use my cousin, and when things that look like taxes or something important, I'll get a text with pictures of it, and she's like, "What do you want me to do with this?" That's really the best solution that I have been able to see in a long, long time. If you have a Mexican driver's license, do you have to carry your residency card? No, and that's the main reason I got one, is because not because I want to drive here. I have no interest in that. But after going through the pain of getting a new residency card, I don't ever want to lose that card again. So I was like, we're getting driver's licenses. Uh which side of the road do you drive on? I drive on the right side of the road here. The only countries that drive on the left are former British possessions. So think Jamaica, New Zealand, uh, Australia, I would guess. Um, let's see. I arrived there this weekend. Should I only bring warm clothes? You coming to Mexico City? Layers. That's always the answer in Mexico City, even if it is the summer. Layers, because it can get cold at night, it can get hot in the day. Do other countries value mental health treatment, counseling, and therapy? Some do. A couple months ago, I interviewed Kendall. What is Kendall's last name? I'm drawing a blank. She is in China. She is a therapist, and we talked about, you know, that whole topic. I'm really drawing a blank on what Kendall's last name is. But if you look back, probably within the last 2 months, I think it was August that we did a live here, and we talked about how you can maintain your mental health when you're abroad. What are some of your options? That kind of thing. Um, in Mexico City, can everything be delivered, even if it takes a while? If it's something in the city, yes, it can be delivered. The problem is when you're trying to get something mailed in. That's the problem. But yes, you can have them go pick up popcorn from the movie theater. You can get cash from an ATM. You can get wine. You can get pastries. You can get whatever delivered. That is one of the beautiful things about living here. Um, let's see. For the second part of residency, does a person need a firm address in Mexico? In my experience, no. But that could have changed. But here's the thing. I've told y'all what the mail system is like. Nobody's mailing anything to you about immigration. They will send you an email, but nobody's going to put anything in the snail mail, because who's to say it's going to get there? Who's to say it's going to get there? We had a few questions about my salsa class. Was the salsa class full? Yes, it was. For some reason, I'm thinking you automatically salsa when born in Mexico. Well, salsa is Colombian, Cuban. It's not Mexican, but it is very popular here. which is probably why the class was full. There were actually more men because it was one of those classes where you don't need to have a partner. There were more men in the class than there were women, which I thought was that I found to be very surprising. Um, can I salsa now? I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know. We've yet to go test that out, and now it's been a month or 2 since my last class, so hopefully I didn't forget everything that I learned. Hopefully it's one of those things like kinda like riding a bike, you start doing it and you're like, "Oh, okay, that's what we're supposed to do." I don't know. Did you choose not to have heat AC, which means the rental will be less? No. In this part of the country, heat and AC are just not a thing. Um, there are some foreigners who like buy an apartment and they will install AC. This past year is the exception. Generally, it's not hot enough here to justify AC. This past year it was. Um, and I didn't even have a fan, so it was not great. Um, but no, it's just not a thing. It's not something that is installed when places are built. So it's not a choice. It's just not an option. If you ever look at Airbnbs in this part of the country, because that's a question I see a lot, they're like, hey, none of the Airbnbs have AC. No, they don't, because we don't have AC. Uh, it's just not a thing. And I want to say that that tends to be more of an issue with foreigners who are like, "Oh my gosh, there's no heat, there's no AC." Um, you just get a cobija, a blanket, or a girlfriend or a boyfriend is what they'll tell you. Do they do siestas in Mexico? I feel like the answer to this question should be yes. Do they do them here in Mexico City? Not in the way like I was in Madrid trying to go fabric shopping at 2 p.m. and that wasn't happening because places were closed. I've never come across a place here in the city that like closed down in the middle of the day as like a published thing. Okay. Oh, lots of comments back over here. Say it's fine with a fan and an open door. I am lucky that in my apartment, I can get a cross breeze. So not having AC for the most part was not an issue. Um, but it was hot. It was much hotter than I wanted it to be, and it should not have been as hot as it was. But that's global climate change. Okay. Yes, you can get cash delivered. When I say you can get anything delivered in Mexico City, I'm hard pressed of thinking what you cannot get delivered in some way, shape, or form. Yes, cash from the ATM. You do that through Rappi. I've never done it because I don't want to pay like extra fees for that, but it's nice to know that that's an option if I need it. Okay. Do you know a company that you can get your mail electronically through? Once upon a time, I used a company called US Global Mail. Um, I stopped talking. She stopped walking. And now she's walking again. I don't know what's up with that dog. I use the company called US Global Mail. There are a bunch of them that will open your mail that they receive in the US and they'll scan it and send it to you in an email. Um, there are a lot of them that do that. Okay. Okay. um, I am very lucky. Trace mentions. Bad landlords. I'm very fortunate. My landlord is a very, very cool guy. Um, and that's probably one of the reasons I have hesitated to move, other than it's also a pain in the butt. But I lucked up. I lucked up with my landlord. I'm intimidated by the language. When I exit the plane, do I have to be able to speak Spanish immediately when I arrive at the airport? I think it depends on the airport. I was thinking about this. When did I get back? Yesterday? What's today? Wednesday? Yeah. When I got back yesterday, I thought about how few people speak English at the Mexico City airport. Like when you go, like I think about that when I go through immigration in many other countries, usually they speak English, especially if it's a non-Spanish speaking country, because that's the only other language that I speak. Um, but here at this particular airport, very few people speak English. Um, do you have to be able to speak English? I mean, Spanish? It would help, but I think you can still navigate the whole thing without it. I don't think it'll be that big of a detriment. Let's see. Do you have a do I have a good hot water supply? I do. I have a boiler. So I have or basically it's like a tankless water heater. I have an endless supply of hot water. That was a must when I was looking for an apartment. And I have a water filter. I made a video that shows how my eco filtro works. Um, okay, remember I told y'all that my electricity bill is subsidized. If you are going to run a heater, a space heater, or an electric blanket, if it doesn't blow out your outlet, it's going to raise your usage. And if you get out of the zone, like I don't know if y'all can see this on here. You see how it goes from green to red? My usage is right here in the green. That means I get the subsidy. If your usage gets into the orange and the red, you don't get the subsidy and you will be paying the full bill. So, uh, are you made out of money? If not, you might not want to run. Uh, you might not want to run that heater all the time. Okay. I see a couple of questions about Charles Schwab, Fidelity, that sort of thing. I have a Fidelity account. Come here. I have a Fidelity account. Um, and they rebate all ATM fees. I know that dealing with Americans from a financial point of view, a lot of institutions don't want to do that, especially when they live outside the US. At one point, I changed my mailing address with at Fidelity to like next to the school, Brown Gate. And Fidelity was like, fine, that's cool. Now I never received any of the Fidelity mail. I should have, but Fidelity had no issue with that being my address. So uh I don't know. Make of that what you will. Make of that what you will. Okay. Uh okay. So I think we've covered it, y'all. And then we covered some stuff we didn't intend to cover tonight. Um, so yeah, I think we're done. Okay, one last question. If you lose the electricity subsidy, do you lose it forever? No, you lose it for that billing cycle because it's based on your usage. The old apartment I used to live in, I did have to break down and get a space heater because it was so cold in there, but I ran it only in one room. And I think I only got bumped up out of the subsidy range like once, one billing cycle. So I hope I have given you sort of some food for thought as you are determining whether or not you're ready to make that move abroad. Remember that you can grab the Move Abroad checklist. It is linked in the description of this video, or you can go to this bit.ly URL, bit.ly move-abroad with a capital M for move and a capital A for abroad. You can get my checklist there. I even have on the YouTube channel, I have a Move Abroad like playlist of like all the videos that I have done that cover the whole Move Abroad process. If you decide that you really need some help, remember that I do one-on-one sessions, and you can book those askadelia.setmore.com. If you feel like, okay, I just need to talk to you one-on-one, ask you some questions, that sort of thing, that is an option as well. Thank you to everybody joining me tonight. If you have not, please subscribe to the channel. While you're at it, you probably want to turn on notifications so that you know when I go live. And maybe give the video a like. I don't know. If you're feeling wild and crazy tonight, do that as well. You're very, very welcome. You're very, very welcome. Glad to help. Glad to help. Okay, so that's it for us tonight. Maybe if I can get my stuff together, y'all will get an uploaded video later this week. Let's see. Okay. Buenas noches.